Well, hello, everyone. My name's Jenny Whitener, and I am the CEO of Bridge Innovate, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all today to Engineering a Culture That Wins. We have a fabulous session today being led by Perry Ann Scott. I can't wait for you to meet her. But first, we would like to say hello to you. So if you're joining our Inspire series today, if you would just go ahead and go into the chat and introduce yourself. Maybe your name and your organization. We'd love for you to say hello. I see someone already saying, welcome everyone coming in. So Luke's doing that from Bridge. Please introduce yourself in the chat. And I would just encourage you throughout today's session, continue the conversation as you're hearing guidance from Perry Ann. Do a big shout out, post questions. If we get a chance, we'll be taking questions at the end of today's session. So Jeremy, thanks for welcome that you're here. Lindsay's here. Hannah, thanks so much for joining. Glenda, thanks from Atlanta. Another person coming in from the Atlanta region. Danny, thanks, welcome. And Joe, Mike, thanks for being here. We're very excited to have you all with us today. Engineering a culture that wins. Thanks, John, for joining us today. So let's get started. Again, please continue to introduce yourselves. Oh, Sarah from Savannah. Gosh, I wish I was there with you. The beautiful time of the year to visit Savannah. And also Elizabeth from Maine. Fantastic. Welcome, everyone from around the country and around the world. We're thrilled to have you here today, Engineering a Culture That Wins. Let's get started. I think, as you know, this series is being brought to you. On the next slide, we'll talk about this series being brought to you by Bridge Innovate. It's a part of our outreach to share the inspirational stories of leaders of innovation, change, and all the things that makes organizations work. And so today we're thrilled to have with us on our next slide, Perry Ann Scott. Perry Ann has her own consultancy. She's the owner of Converge Coaching and Consulting. She's had that firm for 8 years, and we're excited to have her with us today. She brings a wealth of expertise across teams, leadership, and culture development, engaging leaders and teams to really forge the best overall performance for the organization. She comes to us with a number of certifications, a long history in that over decades in working with teams to do this. And prior to that, had been a part of the leadership team at Delta Airlines. She is close to my heart in that she is a fellow Bulldog, having her master's degree from the University of Georgia, undergraduate degree from the University of South Carolina. We won't hold that against her. And is based in the metropolitan Atlanta area. So we are thrilled to have her with us today. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Perry Ann Scott.
Well, thank you very much, Jenny. I really appreciate that. I'm going to share my screen. It is so great to be with all of you and to have Bridge Innovate, the opportunity to be with you. I know y'all are in the Chattanooga area, and I see quite a few friends who are on here as well. So greetings to those of you that I know. Thank you for being here. Okay, I'm sharing and my screen should be good. So let's get ready to talk about culture. So what is culture? A definition that you've probably commonly heard at its highest level is how we do things here. And I really want to start by telling you a story of just a beautiful example of culture and this story came to me actually in the waiting room of a hospital as my father was having hip replacement surgery. A couple of his cronies came in, sat down beside me. One named Richard started talking, and I quickly realized I was going to have to close my computer and hear this story as he started talking about his business and his life. It was fascinating. So Richard was from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, way back in the 70s. He was a very young man and a police officer, just starting his career with an eye to becoming the chief of police one day in Myrtle Beach. And he had grown up helping his dad fix air conditioners in their backyard. Well, suddenly, Richard's dad passed away of a heart attack, and he had to reevaluate his life. And as he was reevaluating, working as a police officer, still fixing AC units in the backyard, he realized, you know what? I'm making more money fixing these air conditioning units than I am as a police officer, and maybe this is something that I should grow. And so Richard did. The amazing story about Richard is this business still exists. And incredibly, as Richard began to talk, he told me all these things that he did. And it's all culture, this culture that he built to make this successful business. A few things, I could talk the whole time about what all he did, but a few things I want to call out to you. And those are things like, every employee, every service employee gets a truck, and that truck has to be sparkling clean all the time. And, you have to have your shirt tucked in when you visit, and you have to have those slippers over your shoes when you walk in. And the person, he hired somebody out of a department store that he was buying pants from back in the 70s, and recognized she had all the qualities of an excellent employee. And over time, he lured her over, and she is still working there. I visited the office recently, and they have a red velvet cord, like you see in movie theaters, around her desk because they revere her so. They have fun in their culture. They have movie posters everywhere, but they are serious about customer service. And their promise is that they will be at an appointment. When they make an appointment with a customer, they will be there within an hour. If they're not there, they pay for it. And they believe this so much that they have a line item in their profit and loss statement that is missed service calls. A couple of years ago, he said that line item was $6,000. I mean, they work hard to keep that low. This business, there's so much more I could tell you. They're generous. They give. If they see somebody who cannot pay for an air conditioning unit, and that's clear, he will comp it for them. If they do a business for a church, they will very often take the payment from the church, and then they will go and then donate that and more to the church. It's remarkable what all they've done. This business is now owned and run by his son. Richard has retired, and they are now bringing in $2 million a month. This is not, Myrtle Beach is not that big of a place. It's remarkable. And they have this incredible reputation. So when I think of a culture and how we do things here and how you can really use that to your advantage as a business, live it and breathe it, that is what I think of is Richard's air conditioning company. So why is culture important? Well, you've heard it said, I'm sure, that culture is your brand. And it is, definitely. It affects everything. It affects the pace of work, what we celebrate, what we tolerate, how we handle risk, how we treat failure. All of this affects our success in meeting our goals as a business. So what does a healthy culture look like? Well, one of the key features, arguably the chief feature of a healthy culture, is engaged employees. And what that looks like is people who want to be there, they enjoy the work, they enjoy their colleagues, and they'll give discretionary effort, without being begrudging about it. Now, this should be a culture where that's not expected constantly, but they are willing to dig deep and give a little more when, the operational need arises. So, companies with engaged employees like this really enjoy a lot of benefits. And I would love to hear what you think they are. If you can type in the chat box, what are some of the benefits that you think an organization, and this could be profit, nonprofit, doesn't matter, but what do you think are some of the benefits that you've seen? Lower turnover. Thank you, Lindsay. Happiness. We all want more of that, especially these days. Happiness is a good one. What else? Anybody seen other things? Productivity. I like it. Productivity, definitely. Because when we're in a healthy culture and we're happier, we're just more productive. Fulfillment, right? Teamwork. Thank you, Sarah. Teamwork. Higher quality, motivated workforce. Yeah, you guys are pinging so many of these. More innovation and creativity. Excellent. Thank you, Lindsay. Great. Folks will run through walls for their management. John, that's beautifully said. I love that. It's true. And that is that discretionary effort, isn't it? I mean, they'll go far for you if they believe and if they're all in. So those are great call outs. Thank you for that. So companies with engaged employees, survey says, this survey being from Gallup, substantially better customer engagement, higher productivity, many of these you name, better retention, we got that one, fewer accidents, kind of a surprising one, but safety is huge. And the survey says fewer accidents, better health outcomes for workers. That's one we want. Up to 4 times higher earnings per share and 21% higher profitability. I would say we all want all of these things, right? This is really important to be in pursuit of. So that leads us to the question then, what gets people engaged? Well, I want to call out 2 things to you that are primary for employee engagement and culture. And one is emotionally intelligent leaders. And then the second one is aligned values. So what is this about high EQ leaders? What do I mean by that? Well, these are leaders who know themselves well. They're self-aware. They know their strengths and weaknesses. They know the value of asking open-ended questions. And then after they ask those open-ended questions, they listen. They truly listen, and they listen with empathy. And they are able to tell people why. Why was this decision made? Why are we going in this direction? Why does this make sense? They can articulate that, and they believe the importance of explaining it. And they request commitment. They don't just make big assumptions about what everybody's going to do, but they treat it as a dialogue. And so what that does for them is that it allows for buy-in, because people don't buy in until they have a chance to weigh in. And high EQ leaders foster collaboration and dialogue. You want to bring people with you as a leader. And if you just declare where you're going and you don't share why, and you don't ask for input, you might get there and turn around and look and nobody's with you. That's not what you want. That's not the definition of success. They also create goal clarity. So high EQ leaders make it clear where we're going and why. So buy-in and goal clarity are critical. So that's a quick picture of emotionally intelligent leaders. Now, what about this aligned values? So it's a push-pull thing. Let's think of it like this: goals push and values pull. So goals push, and that's things that most organizations have. Goals around quality, around the product, around levels of service. There are a lot of metrics typically around those kind of things. What we need to remember is that values pull. Values can attract the right kind of clients to our organization. Values will attract and help us retain employees that are the right fit for our organization. So it's critical to think about this values. So I want you to meet Edgar Schein. If you haven't met him before, he is Professor Emeritus at MIT, and he is really one of the fathers of culture in the United States and beyond. And he's known for many quotes, but one of those is, "The only thing of real importance that leaders do is to create and manage culture." Now, the way Ed Schein describes this is this model. This is his model. And I'd start at the middle to explain it. The middle is values. So, a lot of organizations have stated values, and those might be placarded on the wall. And in that case, those would be visible values. But they also may be invisible values. They're just intrinsically held values by the leadership team, the organization. Beneath that are the assumptions that really drive to those values. Those are, very deep, fundamentally held assumptions about what we believe about things. And at the top, you see artifacts. And you might be thinking, okay, now this sounds like Indiana Jones. What are we talking about? So artifacts is what you see. So values might be what you say that you believe. Artifacts would be what you see. What is the behavior? How do people feel when they're in the organization? How are they treated? What do we celebrate? What does performance management look like? How are decisions made? How are deadlines treated? Or is it a soft deadline, hard deadline? Those kind of things. That's what can be seen. And that is what is considered real, is what we see. So just an example of an aligned value, look at this one and start at the middle. If you had an organization that said, "We value work and life balance," Now, if they're aligned, what that's going to look like is that they do offer things like maybe it's paid time off or flexible accommodations or something like that. So they're saying we believe this and they're providing it. And the fundamental assumption up under that is probably something like, we believe that people's lives and health are important. Might also be that we trust people not to take advantage of us. Okay, so that's a nice alignment there of values, and people trust that. Now, you can have a case of misaligned values. So we start at the middle there and look at that statement. Let's say you have an organization that says, we are bold innovators. Okay, that's one thing to say that. It's one thing to put that sign on the wall or to put it on your website. But if the artifact at the top, if what people feel and see and experience is that actually, if you make a mistake around here, you're going to get shamed and blamed. You might get punished. Okay, that's what's really happening. And the fundamental assumption up under that might be, risk is scary. We are afraid to take risks and fail. We won't tolerate it. Okay, so that's an example of misalignment. The problem there, I'm sure you've seen it, misalignment leads to disengagement because there is this cognitive dissonance when the organization says, we believe this good thing, but then they behave in a way that's contrary to that. People don't trust that. They back away from it. So let me give you a real life example of this misalignment. A nonprofit organization that I know had declared back in the spring of this year that they were going to have a conference with their leaders who were geographically distributed. Now, we're still in COVID. These leaders, some of them had experienced some real significant losses with COVID, had lost loved ones. Suddenly they're being called to come to a conference in a big city, fly in. A lot of these folks actually hadn't flown much before. Fly in and we're going to be all together in a hotel. That doesn't feel safe to them at all. And yet this is an organization that's a nonprofit that's all about serving the needs of the less fortunate, very altruistic. They really care about people. So you see that dissonance there that's incredibly threatening to the organization. Now, fortunately, the leaders, came to realize this and understood that this is not going to work. We've got to go back and hear from the people, and we've got to talk about what will work for them. How can we achieve our goals? What can we compromise? And they came up with a solution that worked. And even though they had announced that this was going to be a requirement, they were able to back off of that. And so, that incredible threat of trust and disengagement, they were able to swing that back up by listening to people. So all was not lost. Now, sometimes when you have disengagement, people are not happy, or maybe you've done engagement surveys and there's, just this element of unhappiness, people are disgruntled, whatever it is. Sometimes there are quick fixes that people want to run to. So what are some things that you've seen? Have you seen at your company, or have you heard of things that people will do to try to make people happy real quick? What are some things that maybe this will work? I'd love to hear if you've seen anything. And fear not, I have a couple of examples for you if you can't come up with anything. But I bet you can come up with some. A party. John, mandatory fun. There's nothing more fun than mandatory fun, right? I love it. I love it. You're going in the direction that I'm thinking of there, John. That's great. And so, what that can look like, things you might have seen, let's get a ping pong table. People will have fun at work. Well, they might have fun. Games, right? Thank you, Hannah. Or, wear pajamas to work day or something crazy like that. Okay. And those things might be fun. But the truth is, these are just, quick fixes. They only touch the tip of the iceberg here. The problem has to be solved at a deeper level. You've got to have those conversations about values, and you've got to be able to really critically view your own assumptions individually and even as a leadership team about those things. So be aware of those quick fixes. Understand what they are. Are they just fun? I'm not saying that they're bad to do, but they're not going to correct a deeper problem. So realize that. So now you might be thinking, great. So how do we do this? Okay. Well, I'm going to guide you through a process that I think you can use on your own in your organization if you're a leader. I can provide a little handout for you if you want it later. I can email it to you. But we start at the center with stated values. Everything has to be connected to that. We've got to be tethered to that always. And if you look at the top, it's about, hiring and then developing and then measuring and then rituals. So let's talk through each of these real quick. So values. All right, values, this is the foundation. These need to be articulated. Typically, organizations will have, let's say, 5 to 7. If you have more than that, you've probably got too many. And I want to urge you to really make sure your executive team is truly aligned on them. And then also make sure that you've got verbs in there. A lot of times we'll have values that are just words: honesty, integrity, innovation, whatever it is, generosity. Okay, but what are the verbs? What does that look like? You've got to describe, what do people do? What do we do because we value this? So you have to dig a little deeper. The next thing is going to be hiring. So hiring is your front door. Who are you going to let in? They've got to be people who align with your values. So your interview questions need to get at not just somebody's capability, but their values. Beyond interview questions, referrals, recommendations, and assessments. There are assessments that can help you determine whether somebody's a good value match for your culture. And then you want to develop people, around your values, especially your leaders and your managers. Develop that high EQ capability in your leaders and managers. Only something like 58% of 58% of people don't train. 58% of companies do not train their managers. And too often, who gets promoted is an individual contributor who's really great at that job. And then they say, you're great at that job. You're promoted. You're a manager now. Good luck with that. They don't do anything to equip them to cultivate that emotional intelligence that they need to do a good job. And so that ends up being, over time, really problematic for the culture, because if you don't like your boss, you end up leaving the company. You don't want that. Now, measuring. What gets measured gets done. And we often measure around goals, but you want to look at, how can we measure our values? And that can be different things. It can be 360 evaluations, measuring our leaders. Are we seeing the values, the behaviors in them that we want to see for our culture? Performance appraisals for the whole organization. Jenny has a great one, by the way, Jenny Whitener at Innovate. So get in touch with her if you need something with that. But really measure your values. How are customers and clients perceiving the way you embody your values? Are they seeing that? And then finally, rituals. So you really want to put rituals, put something on the calendar that's going to visit those values and celebrate them or correct for them routinely. Let's say, for example, you have a value of generosity. Well, maybe you do a Toys for Tots and then you have a party every Christmas. Or maybe innovation, being innovative is a value of yours. Well, maybe quarterly you celebrate, who had the most innovative idea, or even if it was a failure, do you celebrate failure? Do you celebrate where people try things? Different things like that. It depends on your values, how you're going to ritualize this, but you've got to ritualize it. Pay attention to it. This is a picture of what I call a culture clinic. This is what you could use, which I'd be happy to email to you if you want it. Modify it as you wish, but in the center is where you would declare your values: 3, 5, 7, probably 5. What are the values that you really want to hold on to, and wrestle with these and write those action, what are those verb statements for those values? And then you work around this document. So hiring, what are interview questions, that we can ask to get at these values? How are we going to develop people increasingly toward those values? What are we going to measure to make sure that we are manifesting these values in some way? And then ritualize. How will you routinely show attention to your values? So that's what that looks like. And we're at the end. It feels kind of abrupt, but if you want, to have a PDF of that, you can email me at pas@convergecoachconsult.com. There's a QR code for you if you're in that very large percentage of companies that are not currently developing their managers. I'd love to help you with that. You can check that. Launch the Managers Masterclass. I run that twice a year. I'm happy to help out with that. So Jenny, I'll turn it back over to you.
Perry Ann, thank you. That was fabulous. Great insights, and I especially love the culture map at the end. So a great tool for any leader to use as they're looking to shift or modify the culture. Have you got a moment for just a question or two? I think we have just a few minutes if people want to put it into the chat. Any questions for Perry Ann? Here's one coming in from John. Can you provide some examples of assessments during the hiring process to find a good value fit?
Value fit. Yes, John, that's a great question. There are a number of them out there. You do want to check and make sure that they are really evidence-based, not flaky. There's some flaky stuff out there. I use the Hogan, so that's the one that I can speak to clearly, but that one does show leadership behaviors on a day-to-day basis. And then it shows motives and values. How is somebody intrinsically wired? And the closer you can get to their personal motives and values and that of the organization, the better fit it'll be, and the more likely they are to stay for a long time because of that fit. It also shows their potential derailers. So where might they go off the rails a bit? It's good to know ahead of time.
Yeah, great insights there. I love the psychometric instruments, and I think really helpful for people to look a little closer and get beyond some of their own bias. They may not see themselves in a certain way, but when they complete the instrument, it sort of opens up their perspective that really how they're behaving and operating and indicates a certain value.
It's so true. And we're often different than the way that we think we are. And the Hogan is a report on your reputation, surprisingly enough. It's how others view you in the workplace. So, okay, I see Jeremy. Can you touch on how this plays into performance evaluations? Discourages pay for performance and would like your perspective. Okay, so I would agree that pay as an incentive only goes so far, and you want to be very careful with pay as an incentive. There can be other ways to get into that. The performance piece as it relates, and I'm touching on it as it relates to values and how you want to see values demonstrated. So that would need to be a part of a performance conversation, and those should be ongoing, not just annual. It needs to be an ongoing conversation. Jenny is the one who would be great to talk to about this because she has a really great performance appraisal system. Anything, Jenny, that you would want to add to?
Yeah, I mean, I just I love the broad perspective that you're helping us to think through as we shift culture. I know that oftentimes when we're working with clients like you are on culture, the beginning for us is just even the aspiration. You know, what would you aspire that you would want your culture to be? And I think oftentimes we get entrenched in this is where we are, this is what we, you know, this is what we've inherited or whatever. And I think that this aspiration of saying, you know, what do we aspire to, what is the culture of the organization, and then your values that you're taking them through that assessment with the Hogan and sort of mapping those, and then looking using what, as you're saying, the SHINE model, artifacts and so forth. Those are also helpful for organizations to say, are they walking their talk? If they have an aspiration, are they executing their values in that way? Do they have artifacts? Are they reinforcing it? It's really that whole system. And I think the way you've laid it out for us takes something that's typically mystical and demystifies it and makes it something that we can really go after and start to shift. It's difficult, but you can do taking the steps that you today.
Yeah, thank you. You do have to be intentional about it. It will not just happen. I mean, you will have a culture. It just may be the one you want.
That's right. Well, Perry Ann, thank you so much for today's session. Very insightful on a very difficult topic, and some great practical advice from leaders around the world to shift that culture and live a values-driven culture. So thanks so much. We have a lot more coming up at Bridge Innovate. I want to welcome you to our sneak peek coming up on August the 27th. If you'd like to check out our studio for co-working, you can sit 6 feet apart, not to worry, mask if you would like. Lots of things going on here at the studio. Also, a great session coming up with John Gianelli on leading through complexity the Marine Corps way, September 10th. You don't want to miss that. And then biomimicry, demystifying that and its implications to business, coming up September 15th, and more. UTC talking about igniting innovation across education and research. So lots of fun things coming up. We hope to see you again at another Bridge Innovate Inspire series soon. Have a great day, everybody. Bye now. Thanks, Marianne.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you, Jenny.